A black cat in watercolor. Today I have a fantastic collaboration with YouTuber Rachel Varner. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel we do mostly watercolors, bit of mixed media, drawing tutorials, also some business and motivation for artists too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the bell icon, you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make at least one free video here a week on YouTube with extra content for Patreon subscribers. So I've got a special treat for you this week, my first collaboration with another YouTuber. So we've got Rachel from Rachel's Studio, and she's going to be painting a black cat for you. So Rachel and I were chatting online, and we decided that it would be a fun thing to do to sort of choose a subject, choose a photograph for each other. So I asked Rachel to paint a black cat because that really is her specialty. She does beautiful loose watercolors over on her channel, lots of fantastic looking animals. And in return, I'm going to paint a beautiful flower for Rachel's audience. And this will be from a photograph that Rachel herself has taken. Now, if you'd like the photographs for either of these videos, I'm going to leave them in my Facebook group, and Rachel will also have them in her Facebook group. I'll put links to everything in the description of this video. Don't forget, when you pop over to see that other video on Rachel's channel, to make sure that you like and subscribe to her channel. I absolutely know you're going to love her content, so let's get on with it, and Rachel is going to paint a beautiful black cat for you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that warm welcome. And in today's video, I want to make sure that I cover a topic that would be of interest to what Michelle subscribers, you all, are interested in. And I assume a lot of you all are flower painters and also graphite, maybe into drawing, graphite drawing. So in today's topic, I wanted to focus not just on painting a cat in watercolor, but I wanted to make it more of interest to a wider audience, so you all will enjoy this video too. And so today I want to talk about edges and how different edges can really add some variety and a painterly quality to your work. So let's get started and talk about some of the edges that I used in this painting of this black cat. So the first edge I'm going to talk about is just a straightforward, what we call a found edge. There's lost edges, found edges, soft edges. This is a found edge. It's the simplest edge to paint. And a lot of times, especially with beginners, they'll put all found edges throughout the whole painting. Everything will be a found edge, hard edge. And in watercolor, you do that by painting wet on, what we call wet on dry, wet paint on dry paper. And then in other mediums like graphite, it's maybe a dark edge against a light edge, or a medium edge against a light edge, and it's a really obvious edge, and it's really delineated and clear and simple, and every painting needs them. Let's take a look at me painting this wet on dry edge, this found edge. So what I'm doing here in this painting is I've got some orange, pure orange, and I chose orange, by the way, because I really wanted them to vibrate with the greens in the eye, and that's a whole nother topic, but that's why I chose that color. I made really considered and thoughtful color choices in this painting to really make the cat's eyes really pop. Here I am, I'm putting some yellow and orange paint on dry paper for the ears, and I'm just basically filling in the ear, my ear drawing, and it's very straightforward and simple. So that's how you do these wet on dry or these found edges. When you want to achieve a more painterly, or for me, loose look in your work, you try to vary your edges as much as possible to create more interest in the painting, to make it more visually appealing. So let's look at some of these more dynamic edges that really can make a painting look more that beautiful look that just makes us sigh when we look at it. And here next, I'm going to paint a wet and wet edge. And also this could be called a soft edge. And in watercolor, you achieve this by painting wet and wet. Your brush is wet. It's always wet in watercolor. And the painting is also wet because, as you saw, I also just painted in, I blocked in the underlying color. And now I'm going in with one of my favorite paint colors that I talk a lot about on my channel, Daniel Smith Lamp Black, that has this really special fur out ability. It has this really interesting texture as it dries. So that's why I chose this paint color. But I'm also using it cream consistency. That means I just add a little bit of water to my watercolor paint, and then I paint wet and wet, and that makes this soft edge. And that's very interesting, especially in watercolor, because as it dries, the water moves almost like a sedimentary effect out in nature. It's just so beautiful. I love this about watercolor, how it It's like erosion happening on your paper and makes the most beautiful textures, and especially with a special paint like Daniel Smith Lamp Black that has these interesting ways of eroding, if you will, or moving and dancing with the paint as it dries. And it makes these really interesting furred out edges. In other mediums, you get these by using that scrumbly stick thing, cardboard stick thing in graphite. What is that called? It's been eons since I did drawing. But I challenge you to try to get more soft edges in your work, even if you're a flower painter. Let's look at one of my favorite artists who does these soft edges. His name is Liu Yi. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think he might be Chinese, where watercolor originated, China. But he does these beautiful, evocative flower paintings that make me want to weep because they have these soft, melting edges. So look at these edges. They're just gorgeous. I love his flowers, and I think one of the reasons why I love his flowers are all his beautiful soft edges. You'll notice he does have a few hard edges in there too. You need a balance. You need lots of soft edges usually, and a few hard edges when you're trying to paint in this painterly loose style. Another thing about edges, while we watch me fill in some of this other work before we get to the next edge, another thing that you want to think about is edges is balance of edges. You don't want to have equal amounts of hard edges, soft edges, rough edges. You want a little bit of hard edge. It's just kind of like color, where you don't want half of the painting blue and perfectly half of the painting green. You want a lot of blue and a touch of green and maybe a slash of pink and sparkles of white here and there, and the amounts of the color are varied. Same thing with edges. You want to vary the amounts of your edges and put them in different parts of the painting so that it all hangs together. Like for this next example I want to show you, the rough edges. This was a happy accident, and I said to myself, that looks kind of evocative. Let's continue with that and kind of get a little crazy with it and experiment. And that's what I'm always trying to do in my work, is experiment and letting little mistakes kind of grow in my work and push them and see if they make the painting look good. And I really like how this next edge came out, which is a rough edge. And us watercolorists do a rough edge a lot of times by using what we call a dry on dry technique. There isn't too much water in your brush and there's no water on your paper. And so you use the side of your brush and a quicker motion to create this rough, jagged edge, because I just thought it gave them almost like a sense of motion in them. So to make the painting hang together, I didn't want just these rough edges in the ears, so I also put some down in the body just to kind of balance it out, because you want to think in terms of balance your different components that you put in a painting. So that's why I put some rough edges also in the body of the cat. So that's my edge number 3 that I used in this painting. All right, this next edge that I did was really interesting. I love this, and I've been noticing these kinds of edges in other work, and be sure to check out what I talk about in my other video, the Rembrandt Principle, which talks about having different pairings of values between the foreground and the background subject to make the painting look more painterly and to make your main subject not look like a cutout. And real quick, the main idea of this is from James Gurney, who has a book, he's got a blog, he's got a YouTube channel here on YouTube. Go check out his content. But Tom Shepard also has a channel here on YouTube and told me about James Gurney and the Rembrandt Principle, the Rembrandt Windmill Principle, which says that you need different pairings of values between the foreground and the background subject to make it look more painterly. And so I've been trying to do that in my most recent paintings. I want to have a light on light edge, a dark on dark edge, a light on dark edge, and a dark on light edge. So did you follow all that? If not, I will link a video here where you can go listen to me talk more about it. But the edge I want to talk about in this painting, where I had a light on light edge, is on, you see on the top of his head, he has a white spot, and then above that there's some really light background area. I made a point to leave that there for this exact reason, the Rembrandt Principle. But it's an edge, and it's really not it's not even a painted edge, but here you're going to see me scribble a little bit of fur across this edge just lightly, just to say here's an edge, but I'm going to keep it light on light. And so that's another way that I've been really playing with edges lately, is scribbling along them. I'll scribble along them with a Prismacolor fine liner. This one is a 0.005. They've got any of their small fine liners will do though. You can scribble along the edge, especially these edges that are light on light, to create some interest there. In this actual painting though, I used just painting a little bit of very delicate fur textures because I wanted to keep that edge light and light. So that's another way to have a really interesting edge, is to have a light on light edge, and then you can even do some scribbles along it. In my last video that I uploaded just this last Saturday, I talked about scribbling with the top of a paint tube, and I demonstrated that in my last video. I will link it here, and just know that when you click on these videos, you won't click out of this video. It'll just queue it up for you so you can watch this at the end of this video. Okay, my next edge that I want to talk about is another soft edge, and for me as a watercolorist, the way that I usually do this is I scrub it out with this stiff scrubber. I get the stiff scrubber. This is a brush by Royal and Langnickel. There's also the Eradicator for those of you in the UK that I've heard about. But I take this on dry, my paper is dry, I get my scrubber wet, and then I just scrub out an edge and make it disappear. It's almost like a disappearing edge. We call them lost edges. And in this painting, which is like at least a decade old, I was pulling it out to do a demonstration for my Patreon students on how to improve old paintings. And one way is to soften and erase, create lost edges by erasing them with a scrubber. So that's what I was doing in this painting. I was using a scrubber and erasing out part of the ear of this horse, because the ears in this painting are all hard edged. It's just kind of like a beginner looking painting because there's no lost and found edges. There's no soft edges. It's all hard edges when I started this painting. And so for a demonstration to my students, I decided to demonstrate how you can create lost edges in your work, even if you've already painted the painting and it's after the fact. Just make sure you use good watercolor paper if you're going to use this technique, and use paints that are non-staining. If you use paint that is staining, it's going to be harder for you to scrub. So for this edge, you scrub it away. Another way to create these lost edges, in watercolor at least, is to use gouache and put a thin haze, a watery wash of gouache over your finished painting, like I did in this peacock painting. So I also did this, I didn't do that technique in this black cat painting, but I have done it in recent work, like the peacock painting you see here. I used gouache to paint over edges to create lost edges in those areas to make it look more, I just wanted it to look more dreamy. That's what I was going for. I also like to do this in eyes. I like to scrub out edges in eyes, and it really makes eyes look so soft and dreamy. All right, here's another edge that I created in this horse painting to make a soft edge where before there was a hard edge. And what I did was I got the whole area wet, and then I painted in with milk consistency, just soft mane area here along the mane, and that created a really nice soft wet and wet edge. So I painted that in after the fact of this painting being done for 10 years. All right, let's wind this video up with a look back at the rest of the footage of me painting this cat. And I want to talk more in general terms about edges and how you can use them to design a painting that is intriguing and keeps the viewer's eyes interested and moving through the painting. You'll notice that as I'm building in the main components of this cat, I keep everything soft. At least in watercolor, you can always make things harder and more defined later if needed. You can use your edges to control where the viewer's eye goes. You can keep them soft where you want the viewer's eyes to keep moving, and harden them up where you want the viewer's eyes to focus in on. Coupled with more detail, hard edges will tell the viewer's eye to linger and look. So you'll notice that in the cat's eyes, I'll put a lot more details and hard edges around the cat's eyes. And you can do the same thing with other subjects like landscape paintings. Another thing about edges and having soft edges and edges that you don't lose too much control of where they blossom uncontrollably is all about timing. In watercolor at least, you've got to get the paper wet, yes, but then you want to let the paper dry a little bit and then put in your next mark so that when you put the paint down, it doesn't bloom out uncontrollably. It stays within the boundary of the line that you want to create, even though it's a soft line or edge. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're working with your edges is timing. You can't just paint a soft edge any old time in the painting process with watercolor. You have to put your paint down on the paper or your clear water, whatever it is, and let it dry a little bit, depending on how soft you want your edge. If you want it very soft and ethereal and bloom out uncontrollably like a cloud, then you work on very wet paper. But if you want a soft edge like the edge along the cat's right edge, then you need to let your paper dry a little bit and then paint that edge along the cat's side. And the same is true of whether it's a cat's side or a mountain in the background. I hope that was helpful. I've really enjoyed talking to you all. I can't wait to chat with you all in the comments with new people. And now go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody.
So wasn't that a fantastic tutorial? Really super grateful to Rachel for doing this beautiful painting for us. So do make sure you say thank you by popping over to her channel and subscribing. Don't forget you can also find the collaboration that I've done on Rachel's channel, and I'll leave that link in the video description. Also details of where you can get the photograph for the black cat and for the flower. So don't forget to look in that video description. I've also got lots of free stuff for you. There's some free downloadable PDFs. There's even a free watercolor course that you can take. Now, although I don't paint animals as often as Rachel, I do paint them occasionally. I've got a fantastic video that you're really going to like, all about techniques for getting realistic looking fur. You can watch that video right now.